I'm ready.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the GTHub podcast. This is now week 10 of our show, and we begin our Sebring special with the Formula E because that's the shortest way to start.
It might be the shortest way to start, but yeah, it was pretty damn awesome race it was in general. Yeah, it was a really good battle actually between Cheetah's Jean-Eric Verne and Audi's Lucas Di Grassi for the win. There's a really good battle going on between them for quite a decent chunk of the race actually, because it was, in the end, it was quite close. It was less than half a second in it between the pair of them. And yeah, it was just a really good, clean race. It was 37 laps of Punta del Este. The last time Formula E raced in Punta del Este, it was a 33-lap race 2 years ago. And yeah, it was just a really closely fought, clean, fair race.
Absolutely, and I tell you how long the battle lasted because I found it absolutely incredible. I counted this. I made note that when Degrassi caught the back of Verne's car for the first time, it was lap 29, and then that stayed exactly the same for the next 37 laps. They made contact on several occasions. It was just an absolutely tense affair, and then with Sam Bird catching them as well, it was just amazing.
I mean, you say 37 laps, it was 8 laps there, little battle on track.
Well,
in the second stint, from what you said, it was a 37-lap race in general.
Yeah. So about a 8-9 lap battle, yeah.
And on what is also, as well, one of, if not the fastest tracks on the Formula E calendar. As well, it is. In fact, you know what the Punta del Este circuit reminds me of?
Okay.
Surfers Paradise in Australia on the Gold Coast.
Oh, you're right.
It does have a very similar kind of feel to it, both in terms of how fast it is and also the way the circuit flows as well. In fact, if anything, I think it flows slightly better than Surfers Paradise, but still, it's a blooming good circuit. Oh, and both run alongside a nice beach as well.
Yes,
to the point
plenty of chicanes. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, to give an idea how close the beach is, dear listener, at Punta, we're talking, you have the track, and then next to the track, you have the beach. Next to the beach, you have the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, well, certainly is definitely Formula E's most scenic track. I'd give it that. Yeah, very good.
Yeah, and Mitch Evans had a fantastic drive as well to finish fourth after being demoted to the back of the 16th place on the grid. He had originally qualified third, but was disqualified from qualifying for a weight issue on his car.
Big shame, because let's face it, Jaguar, it needs a good result after their poor first season, and this looked like it was going to be it. But
good result. They've had plenty of good results, and
they sit fourth in the team standings, don't they?
Yeah,
I think so. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if, especially Mitch, was actually fighting for wins.
Really?
Later on in the season, I genuinely think that Jaguar can win a race this season.
Just judging on the pace of Nelson Piquet Jr. this season, it wouldn't surprise me if a Jag wins a race or two.
I mean, they've had a podium, but it's not really been fair.
They've had a podium, and they've had some pretty appalling luck. I mean,
True.
Mitch Evans, before, I mean, he originally qualified in third.
Yeah.
Jean-Eric Verne, the race winner, originally qualified in fifth.
Okay, yeah, that is bad luck.
You know, that's where we are at. with how quick that Jaguar is, and it's nice to go into the weekend knowing that any one of about 7 or 8 teams could get a podium as well. It's really quite refreshing to see just how open it is.
Yeah, certainly, and the championship is certainly very open as well. I mean, if you look at the order, yes, Vern is actually quite a long way ahead, but if you look at the actual stats, for example, Rosenqvist has had just as many wins. He's just had a bit more poor luck with the spin in Hong Kong, which was technically his fault, and the retirement in Mexico, and Rosenqvist
Which was
on
the
pace.
Battery
Yes, which was the battery
issues which
issue.
he had.
So Rosenqvist on pace is pretty much right with him. Sam Verne, 3 podiums, same as Jean-Eric Verne. Sebastian Buemi, 3 podiums, same as Jean-Eric Verne.
DNF'd though. Because
Yes.
he had that
Had a
instant where
crash.
he crashed into a wall and damaged, I think, one of the track rods on the suspension, because it was noticeable. I picked up quite early on that he was really in some issues when he, going through turn 13, the near flat out right-hander, he was quite a way away from the racing line and on opposite lock, and actually not going terribly fast. That was the point I realised, now that's terminal, what he had done. So
Yeah, it was only when he
Yeah.
started to slow down for the pit. I mean, you could tell the car was handling badly, but when he started to slow down from the pits and the wheels started flapping, I mean, that's when you know they've really, really damaged that car, and that was not going to be used again. And he really needed a safety car or something to be able to make it to the end from there with his battery usage. But
he needed more than one safety car. He would have
Oh,
needed
yeah.
about 2 or 3 safety cars, probably.
that
Actually, no, I think he
didn't
would have
happen.
just needed 2. I mean, just the 2 safety cars.
It depends how long
Probably
they were.
quite a long one.
Depends
Well,
how
he
long
was
the safety car periods were.
7 laps behind. Nick Heidfeld retired very early on, and that was not a particularly long safety car period from memory. So I think he probably would have taken a decent sized safety car period and a hell of a lot of energy saving for Buemi to have actually made it to the end of the race.
Yeah, that was never going to happen.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we saw Degrassi last year in Mexico, and
The only cars who can really make any energy savings under safety car will appear to be the Venturis, really. But even then, now their pace isn't even anywhere. I don't even know where their pace has fallen to.
Maro Engel's 10th and Edo Mortara was 17th.
They've had appalling races recently, but they had pace so early on.
Yeah, I don't know what caused that to happen, but yeah, it's at least the next round in Rome. It's a new track for everyone, so it should even things up a little bit. I'd have thought, because no one would know what the best setup would be, how best to save energy. I mean, okay, yeah, granted, the simulator systems which the teams are using and have developed to manage their energy saving to the point that they all pitting now with maybe, I'd say, 2% energy maximum. You know,
yeah, probably.
the simulators they have, the teams using Formula E, are serious bits of kit. Let's make no mistake about that. But yeah, I think with Rome, the drivers will be coming into the event having a rough idea which way the circuit goes. Oh, so it turns left here, it turns right here, etc., etc. But at the same time, there's only so much you can really model on a simulator. I mean, even with the most powerful computer in the world, there's only so much you can do with it. So yeah, it's going to be quite an interesting one for sure.
Looking at the layout of the track, it looks very typically Formula E. Plenty of left and right angle, left and right hand 90-degree corners, couple of chicanes. There's a bus stop in there, I see. Many corners, 21 in total. So it's a long-ish Formula E track, a couple of sweepers on either side, and interestingly, you
Yes.
never really see a racetrack where the start line and the finish line are on completely opposite sides of the track, but that is indeed what you got here. The start line is actually
Yes.
between turns 12 and 13, whereas the finish line is in the normal place before turn 1. So that's certainly
Yes.
going to be an interesting one.
It's quite funny as well because the exact location of the Formula E circuit for a few years, I think back in around 2012, 2013, there were talks going on to have a Formula One round in Rome, and the Formula E circuit's in the exact same location,
Yeah.
albeit a different layout. So,
Well, of course. I mean, that layout certainly does not look Formula One like. How are they going to list the laps? Like, it's going to be something like 30 and a half or something like that. Or it effectively will be anyway.
no, they'll
It's
just
the
round
same
up.
distance, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah.
They'll round up to nearest whole lap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's what they usually do.
But the results for the Punta del Este Prix was that Jean-Eric Vernon Cheetah in his Renault was first, Lucas de Grassi in the Audi Sport App Schaeffler Audi e-tron FE4 was second, the DS Virgin of Sam Bird was third, the Jaguar I-Type 2 of Mitch Evans was fourth, Felix Rosenquist from the Mahindra was fifth, Alex Lynn in the second DS Virgin was sixth, seventh was Oliver Turvey in the first Neo, eighth was Jose Maria Lopez in the first Dragon, ninth was sorry, what's his name? D'Ambrosio.
Jerome D'Ambrosio.
Jerome
or as
D'Ambrosio. Sorry, my
Mar-
mind blanked there.
Don't worry.
In the second Dragon, and rounding out the top 10 was Mauro Engel in the Venturi.
I seem to recall Martin Brundle making a joke on BBC's F1 coverage about D'Ambrosio, calling him D'Ambrosio as in the custard brand, and then said other brands are available.
That is a reference I don't understand, but okay.
That's
Honestly,
a
I've
reference
never
only
heard of that
Josh and I
custard
are
brand.
going to understand.
No, I've never heard of that custard brand. But
Oh my god, am I the only person who actually gets that joke?
Probably. Yeah,
Oh,
but moving
bloody
past
hell.
the Formula E, we moved straight into the meat of the weekend, which was the Mobile One 12 Hours of Sebring.
Was it the Mobile One 12 Hours Sebring? I thought it was sponsored by Advanced Auto Parts or something.
It was specifically the 66th annual Mobile One 12 Hours of Sebring presented by Advanced Auto Parts.
Ah, that's where I was getting confused then.
Yes.
My bad.
Speaking of Mobile One, though, on that note, they did just renew their sponsorship of the event for a multi-year deal. So their 23-year partnership continues.
23 years? Crikey, you don't get that these days in motorsport. Blimmin' heck.
Nope. It'll continue
Wow.
for some time, too. So there you go.
It's almost become as iconic a name as the Rolex 24 at Daytona, you know, the Mobile One 12 Hours of Sebring.
Sebring, yep.
I think that's what Mobile One are going for, and you know what? Credit to them.
Absolutely. That's what they said in the release, too. So partnership that's lasting. We had multiple support races over the weekend. Sorry, what were you saying, Josh?
I was just going to say that's the best kind of advertising when you properly and truly do associate something with something else. That's when they've advertised it well.
Exactly. That's a fair point for that. We had several support races over the weekend, and we start with the IMSA Prototype Challenge presented by Mazda race, which was won by the number 7 Charles Wick Racing Ligier DSP3 of Leo Lemaeus and Pato Award.
Hey. Busy lad, did he?
Yes, Pato Award bringing home another win right off the back of his Indy Lights win in St. Pete. So he's a busy boy.
Oh, definitely.
He finished ahead of the number 47 Norma again. So poor Austin McCusker can't find a win yet in the Prototype Challenge.
Oh god, that reminds me. I was reading about the NPC class in that race. The NPC class was won by a gentleman who, quite literally, the week before turned 75.
I was actually just going to mention him.
Oh,
75-year-old Dave House.
many happy
won,
returns.
probably the youngest, or not the youngest, the oldest winner in, I think, any IMSA class or any IMSA race of like the last probably
Ever?
year, ever, maybe, possibly.
Kinda. Who knows?
Yeah, but that was the order of that one, and now we move into the Continental Tire Challenge race, which was the won by Kyle Marcelli and Nate Stacy in the number 60 Core Motorsports Ford Mustang GT4, in a race that was pretty much dominated by the Mustang from start to finish, really. It was just a matter of which Mustang was out front at which time.
Yeah, I also I did watch a little bit of the Conti series race myself, and I seem to remember that the driving standards in that race were not up to the usual standards of the series. I think it's fair to say.
I think it's fair to say you would be correct on that front, because everyone who was watching it scratched their heads at some point, just went, what is happening? The theme throughout the day seemed to be that the Mercedes wanted to crash at every point for some reason.
The McLarens wanted to act like McLarens, I believe, and just break down at the side of the track.
Yeah, the McLaren, the poor MIA McLaren broke again, which is a pattern for them, really sadly to say about them.
It's built in Britain. What else do you expect? Come on, let's be honest. It's a British sports car.
Yeah, well, they broke again, and the Fords were reliable. So they held off with 40 minutes to go out the final race start. And second overall was the number 26 Classic BMW M4 GT4, Toby Grahovic and Jason Clooney. And
good drive by them.
Rounding out the podium was the number 28 RS1 Porsche Cayman GT4 Club Sport MR of Spencer Pampelli and Dylan McIvern, who are the current points leaders, I believe. The real drama at the end of the race happened in TR with the poor, unfortunate retirement of the 77 of Britt Casey Jr. and Tom Long on the very, very last lap on the back straight.
Yeah, 1.5 kilometers
from the finish.
From the finish line.
Absolutely appalling that they fell out there. But their teammates salvaged a win for Compass Racing anyway, in the form of Kuno Whitmer and Rodrigo Salas.
I'll tell you, he was another guy who was pretty busy at the weekend, Kuno Whitmer.
Another double-duty driver, yes, Kuno Whitmer. But they won the TCR class in the 74 Audi RS3 LMS TCR, ahead of the Volkswagen Golf GTI TCR of Rumcastle and the Tanner, or the Rumberg brothers of Tanner and Luke. And rounding out the podium there was another Audi. Yes.
I was going to say, that's interesting, because it would strike me as the Sebring not being a track that would have suited the Volkswagen as well as the Audi, given the relative body shapes of both cars, the Audi being a bit better on the faster circuits.
They are the only... The Golf is the only car that's not an Audi entered in TCR at this point, sadly.
Fairly bold move from the team to run with the Golf, but no, fair play to them. If they keep that
seems to be
form up.
giving them their pace, yes. I mean, and ST was all midi. That's basically it.
Yeah, I was going to say, with the Golf, when we get to tracks like Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, like Laguna Seca, for example, I think the Golf, I think that could be in with a chance of winning, the class.
Well, momentum-based classes, yes, or tracks, actually.
Because, like you mentioned, it's tracks which suited the old Mazda MX-5 well in the ST class. Because that was a proper momentum-based car. Lime Rock as well, come to think of it. So, yeah, it could be... they could be dark horses for the title this year, I reckon.
We will see later on in the season. I hope more come, because it's just kind of weird that it's all Audis at this point. But
All Volkswagen Audi group.
or that, yeah. It's all
Yeah.
VAG products, yes.
At the end of the day, it's the same platform, so.
Very versatile, that, yes. BMW, take note. With their mini project that isn't coming. But moving past that, we move into the race proper, which started with a dramatic qualifying session.
Yes, and not just because both Mazdas got sent, I believe, was it to the back of the prototype field, or was it to the back of the field behind all the GT cars as well?
Well done for preempting that again.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, because I said qualifying, not the race. That was after qualifying. But anyway, the qualifying session started with drama throughout because in all three sessions, they were new track records for the various classes.
I did read the headlines that all three had been new track records. I think.
Well,
Should we
they
start
weren't
with
really track records; they were
class?
class records or whatever you call that.
They so.
'Cause I think the prototype one was actually still off the overall track record. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the overall track record would have been for one of the Audi LMP ones. I'm guessing.
I would think so. Yes, it was either the Audi LMP ones or one of the Acuras or HPDs, whatever you want to call them.
Yes.
But we shall start anyway with the GTD class, which ended up in the hands of the number 51 Spirit of Race Ferrari 488 GT3 of Daniel Serra. With a 1:58.710, which was a full second quicker than last year's pole time set by Tristan Vautier. Yeah, almost actually a second and a half, I think. Nearly. But yeah,
I know
it was
some of.
quick.
I know some of that's down to Serra being a blooming good driver behind the wheel of a GT car. But how much of that do you think could be down to the new tyres that were used this weekend?
A bit, probably. Who knows, really?
Yeah, because Continental brought some new tyres in for the definitely GTD. I'm not sure if they brought new tyres in for prototype as well. But yeah, the drivers, from what I was reading, were actually really rather complimentary about the new tyres on the GTD cars.
Yeah, on that point, Continental brought new tires for GTD and for the prototypes, and everyone seemed pretty satisfied with them. So it's still nice to see them investing in new tires, even in their last year with the series. Which I think says a lot more about Continental than people give them credit for, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, Daniel Serra set a fast time in GTD. GTLM went to the number 25 BMW Team RLL M8 GTE of Connor Di Filippi, also a new track record for GTLM with the 1:55.839 in a car that was brand spanking new because it was the car that was raced at Daytona was wrecked, and also got wrecked at the Sebring test. So it was a brand new car, and it was put on pole. This was also a car that's was supposed to be struggling for pace at Daytona with BOP brakes. So yeah, just stick a pin in that for now.
In fairness, it was the car's global debut, so how much of that could be down to... It was never going to
do well at Daytona, but yeah.
Yes.
So that was the thing. Stick a pin in BMW's pace for now, because it will return in the actual race proper. And for the big bad prototypes, we had the new track record of a 1:47.432 for the number 90 Spirit of Daytona Racing Cadillac DPI VR of Tristan Vautier. So,
that's interesting. Still, he's 2 seconds quicker, in fairness, than what Stefan Johansson managed in a Ferrari FP in 1997. But
I kind of would hope so. Technology has moved on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although still not quite as fast, it has to be said. as what Marcel Fessler managed in 2013 in an Audi R18, which was a
Wow.
143.8.
That's a 1,000 horsepower monster hybrid. So
It would have. I don't think it would have been the hybrids. I don't think you're allowed to run hybrids in the American Le Mans series.
you said 2013. They were running.
Oh, you're right, actually. Yes.
Yeah, you said e-tron. Those are always the hybrids.
Ah, yes, of course I did. My
Because
bad.
2013 was a split year, but the e-trons were the hybrids and the ultras were the non-hybrid.
Yeah, I mean, also you had
That's what it was.
2012 as well, which was the year where it was just a mess, basically.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, wait, it was
Two
2012
series
one.
racing at the same time. What can go wrong?
Yeah, but moving past that,
Yes.
like you had mentioned earlier, the Mazdas were 7th and 6th, showing good pace, but they unfortunately had to start from the rear of the grid because they did a very un-Yoast mistake and taped over their panel gaps, which isn't allowed in IMSA, which I wasn't aware of until they made that briefing in the technical rulebook.
I wasn't
which
aware
set
of
the
that rule
Mazdas
either,
to the
but
back.
the teams would have known. They've all got a copy of the rule book, so rules
Yes,
are rules.
it's a very un-Yoast mistake there and sent to the back, but it didn't really matter because they showed pace throughout the race and came back to the front. Also starting at the back of the grid was the number 93 Michael Schenk Racing NSX GT3 after having a practice 2 crash that destroyed pretty much the entire front end of that car. And unfortunately, the Schenk guys are very well versed in rebuilding cars.
Yes, well, they did have to do quite a lot of that in the old Grand Am days with old Yak Attack.
Well, I mean, just so they're accurate as well. They're very well versed in replacing front clips on that car.
Front clips. I think by the time the car got back to the pits after FP2, it was a good few inches shorter than it was when it left.
I think the mechanics dream of front clips in that team, to be honest.
Quite a bit of damage was done, yes, but they completely negated qualifying to fly in spare parts from Ohio and rebuild the car, and they rebuilt it just in time for morning warm-up and put it out on top of GTD time charts. So good on them for doing that. And they would run well later on in the race proper. But the start of the race went horribly wrong for the outside pole sitter of the number 2 Tequila Petroni SM Nissan of excuse me.
It was Pla behind the wheel then, wasn't it?
Yes, it was Olivia Pla at the wheel when the race started. Which unfortunately was overdriven and kind of slight contact was made between him and Vautier on the going into turn 1, which forced the number 2 onto into the dirt, and well, its race was run after that pretty much because the slight contact made to the left rear of the car had put the car out with gearbox issues or driveline issues due to shock that was forced through the gearbox. So that car lasted all of, I think, 15 laps, something like that. Actually, less than that, probably 15 minutes.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it did not fare very well for the entirety of the ESM crew because the 2 was out very, very early. Barring that, it was pretty dramatic, drama-free for the start, for the most part, for the other classes. And the Mazdas would show pace throughout the race, as well would be Tequila Petroni SM, the lone one, and the number 22, and the Cadillacs would show pace throughout. The 10 would be a teapot constantly, apparently, doing its best tea kettle impression by spurting water at every pit stop, it seems.
Hashtag Mazda Team Toast.
No, because Mazda Team Toast did not happen. There were no
something
fires.
else did.
There were no fires I'm happy to report about the Mazdas this weekend. So you know what, you guys and your Mazda hating can just go somewhere else because they did well. So
Oh, dear. Gotta say that was quite funny. In fairness.
they finally dealt themselves well there with their pace. But the Mazdas were in with a shot at the end until about almost an hour in when, actually no, not an hour in, almost with an hour left, clutch issues started to show their head on the number 55, which was the leading Mazda because the 77 had brake issues earlier on and took it out of the running for the win. But a clutch problem provided that when they came in for their final stop, the 55 could not get started again. So it got stuck in the pits and lost position. So that is why it ended up finishing 6th in the field at the end of the day. But it was really not on pace that it was 6th. It on pace probably would have been 2nd or 3rd at the very most. So it was a lost opportunity for the Mazda team Yost guys there, but they still showed very well in the end. But the pace for the overall at the front was pretty much between the ESM guys and the Cadillac Armada. That would soon fall by the wayside because the number 90 decided to roll itself into a ball at the end of the race.
Oh, yes. I seem to recall there were quite a few big accidents, actually. I think there was definitely two.
And both
properly big ones.
Both at the final corner as well. It appeared that there weren't really that many accidents in the race. It was quite a clean one, but when there was, it was a huge one, and there were two rather large ones, both at the final corner. So initially we had, of course, the number 64 Ferrari getting completely flipped over there by a spinning. It was the red prototype, wasn't it? That's a Ligier. Which one was that?
Oh yes, the number 52 PR1 AFS Ligier.
Yes, so that had a spin, clipped the number 64 Ferrari as it was going round. Ferrari went for a big flip into the barrier. To be honest, I think the commentators kind of underplayed that crash. They were saying it wasn't really that big. But the thing is, it properly dented in the roll cage. And when you see a car being flipped into a barrier like that, that's when you know they've had a big, big impact. Because cars, of course, like that, well, they are designed to withstand all sorts of accidents. No one really expects a car to go into a wall upside down roof first. And that is what the Ferrari did. And to be honest, it's very good. It's a very good job that driver wasn't a few centimeters taller, because that would have been a lot less comfortable if that had been the case. But anyway, everyone was fine in that one. And then later on, of course, we had the number 90 Cadillac, which hit the wall on the exit of the final corner. Interestingly, at the time, there were some people who said he was distracted by his headlight going out on the way into the corner. At the time, I thought it looked like something had failed on the car, but looking back at the footage now, the headlight did indeed go out before the corner. And to be honest, I didn't see any sort of snap or anything like that. It did appear that the driver did seem to just keep going too quickly, despite not having the adequate number of headlights. Should have been slowing down by that point to go into the pits anyway, because the headlights need to work. Maybe he was trying to fiddle with settings or something to get it all sorted, but whatever the case, into the wall in a big way, and a couple of other guys went into the debris as well. I don't know if any of those guys had any recurring problems after that due to the debris, but
actually, yeah, the Tristan Vautier, like you mentioned, took complete blame for that accident because later after the race he explained that he had flat spotted a tire because he was trying to change a switch on the car, and when he got into turn 17 he locked up and then didn't know that he was too far wide, and then when he realized he was in the marbles, he just gassed it and went straight on into the wall. So
did he mention anything about his headlight?
I don't know if he didn't say anything about his headlight, but he mentioned he had flat spotted his tires trying to change a switch on the car, which I assume must be related to the headlight.
Yes,
but
quite
because he was
possibly.
flat spotted and went wide, he just got sucked into the wall, really, and that's what happened. Which kind of threw the car into the air and threw the tires everywhere and to the center of the track. And then along came the number 90, or not the number 90, the number 69 Hart Acura, I believe. That's the one that came across and broadsided the tires that were laying in the middle of the road.
Did a good job
And
of not going straight into them. I mean,
no,
swung
he
it
did
sideways.
a remarkable job to just sling it sideways and avoid it. But
Well, didn't, but you know.
well,
Didn't
avoid
avoid it.
too much. Avoid hitting it square on the nose, because
Yeah.
that would have been a huge accident if he did that. But broadsided the tires, came into the pits, repaired some damage, went back out again, and then the number 54 Core Autosports Orc, I believe, came along and unfortunately hit some of the stranded tires that were out on track. So that accident had a lot of casualties at the end there.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with that one. But there wasn't that many accidents, as you had mentioned.
Well, there was a very weird
before.
pace car period earlier on in the race when someone's tent, A-frame kind of thing, blew onto the road, which is interesting. At first, I thought it was an umbrella like we saw at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix last year, but it was a proper kind of A-frame tent. Can you imagine what that would be? Kind of as a tent owner, kind of coming back to your tent to realize it's not there and then seeing it in the middle of the road or something like that. I can imagine it's very embarrassing knowing that you've kind of, or a piece of your property has neutralized a race.
Well, it was quite a big tent awning. I don't know the correct word. I guess it's tent,
Yeah,
camper
like
coverall thing. I don't know what it's called. One of those things you go camping with or tailgating with. It's one of those tent things. But it got blown onto the track. That was a caution to pick that up, obviously. And that was probably actually the oddest safety car of the day. But that was the odd incident. Why couldn't no one hit it or ran over it?
Oh, there was another full course yellow safety car period when one of the Lexuses had an incident. It was the 14 Lexus had an incident, and then dragged a lot of advertising boardings onto the track. That was a bit of a weird one because there appeared to be no reason why it would steer off the road into the advertising board in the first place. Had its bonnet up over the windscreen, but still appeared to be acting a bit weirdly after that. But whatever the case, that caused full course
I think
yellow
that
safety car
car
period.
had a spin and ran into the advertising off the side of the track. I think that's what happened there.
Yeah, I think
Wasn't
the
recovering
fifth.
from the spin at that point.
Oh, wasn't that the blue Lexus?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, the 14, and that
Yeah.
led to the hood having been displaced after that, I believe.
Yes, and because the 15, it's quite a funny moment where that actually parked in the
yes.
wrong pit bay in the Porsche Core Autosport Porsche North America team's pit.
Yeah.
Oh yes, that's right, the 911 spit. Yeah.
Yeah, with I think David Heinemeier Hansen was behind the wheel at the time, the gentleman driver from Copenhagen, originally in Denmark.
Annoyingly, the Porsche was actually trying to come into the pits at the same time and ended up giving it a good old shove, like get out of my box. So that was interesting to see.
DHH apologised on Twitter, and the Porsche guys said, "Nah, it's fine, mate."
I still think one of the funniest wrong pit box situations was in 2013 in Formula One when Lewis Hamilton pulled into the McLaren pit box, forgetting that he'd moved teams, and the McLaren guys, I suppose, were a bit like, "Oh, good to see you back. Wait."
Get out of our pit box. True, yeah.
Yeah.
But that happened. There were actually in total, so talking about the accident that happened, there were in total, I think 4 or 5 cautions, or 4 or 5 safety cars, something like that, in total.
Really,
but there
not
wasn't
much
that
for a
many.
12-hour race.
Something like that. There probably was more, actually, now that I think about it. possibly. Or am I thinking of the Continental Tire race? I'm possibly thinking of Continental Tire race. But that was that was an odd incident with the pit board thing. But the overall winners came down to a battle between the number 22 Tequila Patroni SM Nissan DPI of Johannes van Overbeek, Pipo Durrani, and Nicolas Lapierre, who triumphed over the number 10 Wayne Taylor Racing Cadillac DPI VR of Jordan Taylor, Renger van de Zande, and Ryan Hunter-Ray by just 12 seconds, which was close in the end because they had to hold off over fuel strategy and that final restart to claim the win. And rounding out the overall podium was the number 31 Whelan Engineering Cadillac DPI VR of Philippe Nazar, Eric Curran, and Mike Conway. More news about Mr. Curran later on. And the best LMP2 car or global LMP2 car was 4th overall in the number 54 Core Autosport Orca 07. John Bennett, Colin Braun, and Romain Dumas. More news on Mr. Dumas later on as well.
So they know how to run a program.
The Core Autosport guys know how to run things. Yeah.
Yeah, the way they dominated Prototype Challenge as well meant that even after the year in GTD with the Porsche, you knew that if they were going to get back in a prototype, they'd be at the sharp end of the field.
Indeed, yes, they know how to run things. Like I mentioned before, the top Mazda was 6th of the number 55 Mazda RT24P of Jonathan Bomarino, Harry Ticknell, and Spencer Piggott. Unfortunately, one lap off the pace because of the unfortunate clutch issues that dropped them down. The second Mazda came home in 8th, still quite off, 10 laps off the pace, but still had pace on it because they set some of the fastest laps of the race were set by the 55 and the 70. So when we come to Long Beach in a couple of weeks' time, the Mazda should be at the front fighting for the win. And in GTLM, in a very close battle throughout the race, with the BMWs finally showing pace, thanks to their BOP waiver and just, well, them being good at Sebring over the years anyway, because BMWs always are. It was a close battle between the Germans, the German brands of the Porsches and BMWs, with the 911 Porsche GT team, Porsche 911 RSR of Patrick Pilet, Frederick Makavicki, and Nick Tandy triumphing by 6 seconds over the number 25 BMW Team RLL M8 GTE of Alexander Sims, Connor DeFilippe, and Bill Oberlin. So Bill Oberlin sadly did not get his Sebring win in his 25th start in the 25, and did not get to try and equal Scott Pruitt for the all-time win record in IMSA. He'll have to try again later in his endurance outings. And rounding out the podium in GTLM was the second Porsche GT team entry of the 912 in the hands of Lawrence Van Thor, Earl Bamber, and Jean Marina Bruni. And the Corvettes were sadly at the back of the GTLM grid, along with both of the Fords who ran into trouble, and the poor Risi Ferrari who also ran into trouble with pace just later on in the race. And rounding out the final class of the race was the triumphant return of Lamborghini. So that's 2 in the wins in a row for Lamborghini in the GTD class. This time coming in the hands of the number 48 Paul Miller Racing team of Brian Sellers, Snow, Bellany Snow,
Madison.
Madison Snow. I always get Snow's confused in my head.
I was going to say
so many M's.
Jon Snow, what?
Well, there is actually, I think, a Jon Snow in that family.
I was going to say Melanie Snow. I think is Madison Snow's mum.
Yeah, I know, but I have that ingrained in my head from her days in GTC and the ALMS. So yeah.
Madison Snow's mum is a
Anyway.
racing driver?
Yes,
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
the Snows are a race family. Yes,
Well, I
very
knew that.
successful racing family. Brian Sellers, Madison Snow, and Corey Lewis, who is the new endurance driver for that team this season. Second, and a very surprising second, is the number 63 Scuderia Corsa Ferrari 488 GT3 of, I can't believe I'm actually going to say this, but Cooper McNeil,
Oh.
Alessandro Balzan, and Gunnar Jeanette.
Well, Balzan and Jeanette, I can understand.
Yes, but Cooper McNeil doing well, I refuse it. This is a typo, and I don't like it.
It's fake news.
It's fake news,
mate.
news
Come
all
on.
about it. And rounding out the podium in GTD was the number 33 Mercedes AMG Team Riley Motors AMG GT3 of Ben Keating, Jeroen Bleekmolen, and Lucas Stoltz. And just outside the podium was the Land Audi, the best of the Audis, and the best Lexus was the number 15 that you mentioned in fifth.
I was going to say, the Land Audi, wasn't that the one that had Quagmire and Pikachu driving it?
Ah, yes, Christopher Mies and Alicio Picariello, yes.
Yes.
Fifth was the best Lexus. Sixth was the best Porsche in the hands of Wright Motorsports. So they're slowly clawing their way back into contention in the title fight for GTD to get Christina Nielsen another title. And the number 93 Acura that was destroyed, like we had mentioned earlier, came back for a wonderful 7th place finish in class, which is a great result for those guys after rebuilding it from basically nothing. And that was a comeback story for all comeback stories, really. And finishing 16th in GTD, which isn't that bad of a result, actually. It was last in GTD. Actually, no, it wasn't last. It was last of the running cars in GTD. Was the number 36 CJ Wilson Racing Acura NSX GT3 of Mark Miller, Till Bechtelsheimer, and Kuno Wittmer. But they had some dramas throughout the race. Running into debris that took out the left front headlight that they had replaced with a front clip from one of their old real-time racing spares.
Oh, wow. So, am I right in thinking that their car was the old real-time racing World Challenge car from last year?
One of them, yes. That's why, if you notice, the car that finished the race ended up with a blue front on it that was still liveried in the real-time color.
It was almost like Turner at Daytona when they ran their new Liquimoly livery, but then because they needed to change the hood on that car, they actually had the old yellow and blue hood on the car.
Yes.
Which was actually
very
quite
color clashing livery there that just drove my eyes crazy, just going, it's not correct.
I was going to say, colour clashing is a bit of an understatement.
Yeah, that's true.
To be honest, if it works and if the car still goes, then I don't think they'll really mind so much that the car looks a bit weird.
This is also true. But that was the Mobile One 12 Hours of Sebring presented by Advanced Auto Parts.
And not fresh from Florida this year.
No, apparently that's done, as long with Visit Florida, so those sponsorships are done with. But now we move into some news that concerns the Pirelli World Challenge, since their Sprintex opener is this weekend. And you can all watch the races live online this year. They fixed that. They wronged that, right? So do watch that, because there's nothing else on, really, this weekend, other than the F1. More on the F1 later as well. But that concerns the fact that real-time racing has come back to the Pirelli World Challenge, but instead of an NSX GT3 program, they will be running a brand new Honda Civic Type R TCR in the hands of Ryan Eversley.
I approve.
Yes.
Good to see Ryan Eversley have a driving World Challenge this year alongside his commitments with the Dinner with Racers podcast.
Other podcasts are available.
Yes.
Just not as fine. Hmm.
But yeah, it should be a pretty good year for them in TCR. It's a new class, I believe, World Challenge this year, and yeah, it'll be a learning
It's
year.
part of their touring car package. Yes, it's a new class.
I'd say so. It should be a learning year for everyone, but with real-time racing's resources, I think they'll be in with a shout this year, definitely.
Well, they should be, yes. And part of that announcement, the interesting bit of news that was buried at the bottom was that 2 additional Civic Type R TCRs and a potential NSX GT3 program could also be run for any customers that are interested.
Ooh.
So there is still an NSX GT3 in their possession if someone wants to run it.
No, I haven't got the money for that.
Yeah, someone will come along if we're with real-time money, presumably. K-Pax Racing has reverted to their spare chassis for this weekend at COTA.
Unsurprisingly.
Unsurprisingly, yes, after the wreck they had at St. Pete, which the team has revealed that lingering issues from a crash suffered on Saturday was the cause of the incident because they didn't have enough time to check everything over. So it was quite obviously a brake failure, and they admit that.
To be honest, it's a bit unsafe that the car was driving if that was the case.
Well, it was fine. It lasted for a majority of the race. It just didn't end up finished.
Yeah, but let's face it, if they'd had a catastrophic brake failure, that could have been very dangerous indeed.
This is true as well. Yeah, well, luckily it ended up fine. So they caught it, and they're building up a spare chassis, which is very interesting because the chassis that they are using now was supposed to be in the hands of a customer. So that customer will have to wait a bit for their wrecked chassis to be rebuilt. To have the customer chassis, I guess, go back to them. But the other bit of PWC news concerns that of Eric Curran, who will be joining Daniel Kelvitz in the Callaway Corvettes for the Sprint X season.
I approve. Should be quite a good lineup, that, actually, because Karlvitz knows the car immensely well. Curran's obviously got the knowledge of the circuits and that, so yeah, I should be. I reckon I'll be one to watch this year in
And let's
Sprint
face it,
X.
it's a good old cutaway.
Exactly, it's a Callaway, and it's a good combination of drivers in it. So we'll see what happens this weekend and how well they get on. And that is the PWC news that I had lined up, other than the news that Pirelli has renewed its title sponsorship and the official tire supplier of the series. So that'll continue onwards, and it's another series that runs GT3 cars on Pirellis for the near future. Also, yes, because that's our own TOP. But sticking with GT3 news, news that we didn't mention from the other weeks was that the FIA has come out and will enforce minimum production numbers for GT3 cars.
Yes, am I right in thinking that that Cadillac might be the reason why?
Chances are, indeed, the FIA was thinking this. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
The old ATS-V, built to GT3 regs and never actually intended to be sold to customers
at all, regardless of whether or
all.
not you had enough money to buy one, i.e. Stevenson.
Idiots.
Yes. But manufacturers are now mandated that they must produce 10 units within 12 months of their homologation date and 20 units within 24 months of their homologation date. So this change makes it far less likely that small brands will ever enter into GT3. So well done, Cadillac, for ruining everything.
That does seem a bit of a shame.
I would assume that they would mandate 10, which doesn't seem that bit of a hardship. But I think if you showed that you could make your car's worthy or your car's optional to customers, I would suspect they would waive the 20
Good.
if you showed that you were building cars for customers. I don't think the FIA would be too bothered about the extra 10.
Well, an
But then
extra
again, this
10.
is the FIA, so.
I mean, it's when you don't produce enough that's the problem.
Well, they only have to build
Ford.
10 within 12 months. So that means they have to build 10 within a span of the first year that they have been homologated and 20 within 24 months. So
Okay.
basically saying they have to double their production in their second year of homologation, which doesn't seem that bad actually, but perhaps it's a stretch for others. I don't know. This makes it difficult for TVR to make a GT3 car whenever they come back.
I tell you what, though, the TVR I'm sure would sell very well.
It's true if it comes whenever it comes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was just the thing. We now head into a bit of Pikes Peak news that I have written down here. And would you care to guess what Travis Pastrana will be doing this June?
Driving a Porsche Cayman GT4 up the side of a mountain in the state of Colorado, America.
That would be correct, yes. He will not be alone in this class either. Yes, Travis Pastrana will be the headline for the Porsche Cayman GT4 Club Sport class for the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb this June. Others in this class will be Justin Bell, one guy who has lots of experience in Caymans, GT4 Caymans, and that's Till Bechtelsheimer, and one Mr. Tim Pappas of Black Swan Racing.
Ooh, that's going to be fun.
That's a fun-looking lineup, and or class for Pikes Peak. And also of Pikes Peak news is that the Volkswagen IDR has been unveiled, and this is the electric prototype that will run in the Unlimited division to claim the overall pole or the overall time of Pikes Peak. That will be driven by Romain Dumas this summer, and it is quite something.
I've seen the images of it already, and yeah, I'd like to think that's chucking out a fair amount of downforce.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it now. That thing looks absolutely like a contender.
Well, one would hope so with the cubic amount of money Volkswagen's throwing at it.
Look at
Yes, we all saw how much money Peugeot decided to throw at their Pikes Peak program in order to absolutely obliterate the record and actually go faster than what their computer simulations said.
In fairness, I don't think any of that money was actually Peugeot money so much as they were just raiding their parts bin of their 908 that they had laying around.
The 908.
Red Bull gave them all the money.
The 908 and the old Pescarolo engines they had lying around in the back of the workshop.
Back of the workshop somewhere, they just scrounged a bit out of the
They were
bin.
like, just have a look and go, oh, we can probably stick that where the rear seats went in a 208. Yeah, that looks like it might work. Yeah.
Sounds like their 3008 DKR program, actually.
Actually, yeah, it kind of does thinking about it, yeah.
Here's this diesel engine we have laying around from our LMP1 car. Just stick it in this tub and see what happens. I'll just go off-roading with it. Oh, let's go Dakar racing with it.
Yeah, let's just say split it in half and into the Dakar.
Exactly, yes.
See,
But that is all
literally
the...
half a 908 engine.
I think it's still the engine from a 908, actually, isn't it?
It's only a V6, I believe.
Oh, right, so they've
Dakar
cut it in
spec.
half then. You're right.
And about half the capacity, possibly, as well.
Well, easier to make half the capacity when you split things in half when it's like double-digit, triple-digit torque figures, yes. So, you know.
Yeah. I mean, the old Aston DBR9, the V12 in that, when it was originally in the DB7, was literally a pair of Ford Mondeo V6s joined at the crank.
Of course.
Quite literally. So the engine which Aston ran in the V12, they ran in the Lola chassis, and at Le Mans and in the American Le Mans series was literally a pair of V6 engines putting out about 200 brake each in road car trim from a medium-sized sedan.
Well, that is the Pikes Peak news, and I think that's all the time we have for you, isn't it?
I was going to say, just quickly, Memo Rojas, he's been confirmed at IDEX Sport alongside Paul Lafargue and Paul-Luc Chatin for Le Mans and the European Le Mans Series.
Nice.
Will Stevens will be joining Timothy Bure and Julian Canal at Panis Barthez competition
Nice.
this year. And Eurasian Motorsport put out a statement on Twitter regarding an article on sportscar365.com.
Right.
Oh, yes, that. I forgot
I've
about
heard something
that.
about this.
Yes, Sportscar365 put up an article about the Eurasian Motorsport entry. And then Eurasia put out a statement on their Twitter feed saying, and I quote, following publication of a wholly inaccurate article by Sportscar365 in which it was stated that Krone Racing would take over Eurasia Motorsport's 2018 Le Mans entry in the LMP2 category, Eurasia Motorsport wished to make the following statement. Eurasia Motorsport will complete in the 2018-24 Hours of Le Mans. My God, the grammar in this. In 2018 with a Ligier JSP 217 Gibson, fully utilising their entry granted by the ACO for this year's race, as it did in 2016 and 2017. The team will run the car under the Eurasia Motorsport banner with its Asian crew, and under no circumstances has it passed over its entry to any other entrant, team or individual. Eurasia Motorsport was completely unaware and not consulted prior to the publication of the article, and had it been so, would have happily put the matter in fact straight to prevent this inaccurate and disruptive story being published. Eurasia will formally be announcing their 2018 driver lineup shortly. And
So it sounds to me like someone has either misheard something or just completely made up a news story which isn't right at all.
Basically worded it, well, not brilliantly, if we're being honest.
It sounds like they just completely lied.
Well, the lineup, they did shortly afterwards confirm the lineup as being Andrea Bertolini,
Right.
Nick Johnson,
Nice.
and of course, where Nick Johnson goes, well,
Tracy Krone must follow.
yes, Tracy Krone, God help us all, is in an LMP2 car again.
I thought Tracy was quite good actually. What happened last time he was in a P2 car?
He's not
Seemingly
exactly
spent
the
half.
best behind them.
What Forza said, also seemingly, whenever that thing was on camera at Le Mans, it was usually pointing the wrong direction.
All right. Obviously, I haven't seen enough sports car racing to know about the real Tracy Krone yet, but
yes, he's in a prototype that's as quick around the Circuit de la Sarthe as a 2011 Audi LMP car.
Yes.
That's you can.
But anyway, that is that news, and I think we're going to lose you now because you have stuff to do.
Yes, I have quite a bit of stuff to sort out for tomorrow, so and I will see you next week.
all right. See you later, Rob.
All right,
Yes.
cheers. Thank you, bye.
Mm-hmm. And now we were too.
Yeah, we probably should head off pretty quickly after this. So, have you got any more news stories in particular you want to talk through?
Well, I was just going to briefly mention the F1, and that's
Yes.
more of your forte. So, anything you'd like to bring up?
The weather forecast should be interesting. I was mentioning this just before the podcast. They say it's going to rain, and with that being Australia, that means it's possibly going to absolutely chuck it down. Of course, Australia gets very, very wet sometimes, and it's a very difficult track in the wet with, of course, the street road markings and things like that. And yeah, it should definitely be an interesting one. Even if it isn't wet, it's the first one of the season. It's the first chance to really see where the teams are and who's been keeping their cards close to them, who's really sort of shown themselves already and has set the bar too high. You get so many interesting stories arising from the first round every single year. And to be honest, on a year like this one, where so many teams have improved, and there doesn't appear to be any team that's dropped back or that could really drop back. Really, I think it's going to be the closest year in F1 history. That's my first prediction. Interesting. I heard a lot of people saying last year that F1 is getting less kind of close and that the teams are spreading out and things. I think that's utter rubbish. I mean, I've been looking at the statistics. Last year, I think the teams or the grid in race 1 was actually less spread out than it had been in 2016, especially with the loss of Manor, and the year before and the year before that, and etc. etc. And when I asked that type of people when they thought F1 was truly close, they said the early 1990s, which appears to be the era when about 6 cars would DNQ before even the start of the race. So what I'm saying, I'm ranting a bit, but what I'm saying is that really you should not write off this Formula One season before it starts. Halo or no Halo, Liberty Media or no Liberty Media, it's still Formula One, and it's still going to put on a fantastic show in Australia. I'm sure it will. So I'm certainly not going to miss it, and I hope that you won't either, because it's going to be a good one.
Well, I'll be watching it because I'm curious how the new overlords of F1 will give us reduced TV coverage in the form of ESPN this season, but that's a different story entirely.
Yeah, trust me, we've had it for years with Sky, so
Yes, we're getting your Sky feed actually, but probably with commercials interspersed, so that should be fun. Yeah, that's the thing that's happening. Who would you say would be winning the Grand Prix?
Ooh, that's a difficult one. It's very difficult to look past Lewis Hamilton after he was so dominant in the second part of last year. But the thing is, actually, at the start of the year, it tends to be when he struggles. So, for example, in 2014, he really dropped back from Nico Rosberg at the start of the year. Everyone thought Rosberg was going to dominate the title at that point. 2016, he dropped back at the start. 2017, he dropped back at the start. Melbourne always seems to be a track where both Ferrari and Red Bull are strong. So really, statistically, you can really overlook Lewis Hamilton here. So Daniel Ricciardo has to be one to look out for. It's his home race. He's going to be spurred on. Last year he had a bad race there, crashing it in qualifying, then having all sorts of problems before the race and in the race, didn't finish it. And of course, wherever Ricciardo's strong, his teammate Max Verstappen has to be factored in as well, although Verstappen tends to come into his own in the second half of the year. It's unpredictable. Formula One is always unpredictable. Vettel. I'm going to say Vettel. He's always extremely strong.
Ooh, interesting.
He's always extremely strong in Australia, and yeah, the last 2 years he's looked like he's going to win Australia. He's had the pace for it. Yeah, I'm going to say it's Vettel.
I'm going to go with the Mercedes, either Hamilton or Bottas, because they were testing and setting the quickest times on medium tires. So, yeah, that's all you need to know really about their pace.
So you don't think Ferrari and Red Bull were keeping their cards close to them?
Well, I'd be pleasantly surprised if they were close. It's going to be close, but I don't think they're going to win. How about that?
Okay, well,
they'll be in with a shot, but I don't think they'll win.
It's unpredictable. People call Formula One the most predictable racing series. It really isn't. It's still highly unpredictable, and that's what I love about it. So, we'll see.
The battle in my mind is probably going to be in the midfield between Haas and Renault and the Toro Rossos.
Really?
That's the battle that's going to be to watch, I think. Because Williams will be nowhere. And Force India as well, but Williams will be nowhere.
Well,
I think Williams and Sauber will be at the back.
I think the battle for fourth in the championship this year is going to be between Force India and Haas. I believe that Haas has made a big improvement in winter testing. They've really got a lot of power down. There's many teams being impressed by them so far, and I don't think that Toro Rosso will be close enough to challenge. I think Toro Rosso is going to be pretty much fighting with Williams near the back. Yeah, they proved very consistent in testing, and they pulled out a couple of good laps. But and their driver lineup is good, Gasly and Hartley, but it's not really. There's nothing really special about it. It's not thrilling, like for example the I'm trying to think, like for example the Force India lineup is, or teams like that. I mean, Force India have one of the strongest lineups on the grid by a long way. So I feel that Toro Rosso is going to struggle this year, and people are saying that that Honda have got their act together and so forth.
I think you write off the Toro Rosso Honda package at your own peril, because there's just something. The amount of mileage that they've got under their belt already with testing compared to what they were with McLaren just puts them in good stead in my mind, because Brendan Hartley knows how to develop a car, because he's a championship-winning, a world champion sports car driver, and Pierre Gasly's
never
a
been that
quick
good
driver.
in a single-seater though, Hartley. I do really question his single-seater abilities.
He never really got a shot at single-seater racing until now.
Well, he did. He had a full kind of junior career in it, and he admits himself he wasn't blistering.
Oh, he wasn't, but he was dropped by Red Bull, I think, far too early. But
no, I think Red Bull saw all they needed to see. He didn't deliver when he needed to, and then went and did better in sports cars. But as a single-seater driver, I doubt it.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I don't know. I still rate him very highly. But he'll be a good driver for them. And they have James Key as their technical director, and he's no slouch at designing a practical a pretty fast and handy F1 car, and with a decent engine that the Honda seems to be this season. I think that they will be solidly in the midfield. But that's just so. We will see what happens.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I was going to say just now, a lot of people have been saying that Honda have got their act together, and that it's all going to be sorted, and they're going to be right up with the other engines. I still have my doubts. From what I've seen of Honda in the last couple of years, you can blame that on McLaren, but you can't blame it all on McLaren. At the end of the day, Honda still did produce an engine that was not adequate, whatever the reason for that. And I'll need to see it in a race situation to truly accept that they've made a difference. So we'll see.
We'll see. Yes. And on that note, we shall preview that the F1 is this weekend, as I said, the Rolex Australian Grand Prix, and the Pirelli World Challenge Sprint X races from COTA are this weekend. Do watch those if you're able to, because something tells me they'll be quite interesting and entertaining. I believe that's the GTS races and all the touring car classes for the Pirelli World Challenge there as well. And also is a NASCAR on the weekend, but you don't have to watch NASCAR if you don't want to. But that's all that is running this weekend. And thank you for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be seeing you next week. Of course, I won't be. I will be in the podcast, but as a pre-recorded piece, as I've got a commentary now overlapping every other Tuesday. So that's going to be happening every other Tuesday on the alternate set of weeks from now, if that makes sense. But you will still get the ordinary cast of Forza, Rob, and I believe Penta as well. He will certainly be streaming it. So we'll see you then.
Yes. Goodbye.